Imagine a 19-year-old girl who drops out of Stanford, not because she failed, because she had an idea so big she couldn't wait. She told the world she invented a machine that could detect cancer and hundreds of diseases from just one single drop of blood. Investors gave her $900 million. The US military wanted her technology. Walgreens put her machines in 40 stores. There was just one problem. The machine didn't work. It never worked, not even close. And Elizabeth Holmes knew it from the very beginning. This is Theranos, the most dangerous fraud in Silicon Valley history. Palo Alto, California, 2003. Elizabeth Holmes was 19 years old, studying chemical engineering at Stanford University. She was brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely terrified of needles. That fear became an obsession. What if just one tiny drop of blood from a finger prick could tell you everything about your health? She dropped out of Stanford, used her tuition money as seed funding, and founded a company called Theranos. The vision was simple: democratize healthcare, make blood testing cheap, fast, and available to everyone. It sounded like magic, and Silicon Valley loves magic. The money started flowing. She lowered her voice deliberately to sound more authoritative. She wore the same black turtleneck every single day, modeled after Steve Jobs. She didn't just sell a product, she sold a vision, and everyone bought it. By 2013, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes was worth $4.5 billion on paper. She was on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Time magazine, called the next Steve Jobs, the youngest female self-made billionaire in American history. Board members included 2 former U.S. Secretaries of State. These were some of the most powerful people in America, and they all believed her. The device at the center of it all was called the Edison, a small, sleek box that claimed to run 200 blood tests from one finger prick. Walgreens signed a deal. Safeway invested $350 million. The U.S. military explored using it on battlefields in Afghanistan. At its peak, Theranos had over 800 employees. Famous investors poured in hundreds of millions. Everyone was dazzled. But inside the Theranos laboratories, the scientists were terrified, because the Edison machine didn't work. For the majority of tests, Theranos was secretly using competitor machines made by Siemens, modified to use smaller blood samples. Even then, the results were wildly inaccurate. Patients were told they had HIV when they didn't. Patients were told they didn't have cancer when they did. Real people, real consequences. And Elizabeth Holmes kept smiling for magazine covers while real patients suffered real consequences. Inside Theranos, people were starting to break. Tyler Schultz was one of them, 22 years old, Stanford graduate, grandson of board member George Schultz. He joined Theranos excited and full of hope. Within months, he realized the tests weren't working. He reported his concerns internally. The response? He was threatened, monitored, intimidated. Private investigators followed him. His own grandfather, George Schultz, sided with Elizabeth Holmes over his own family. Then there was Erica Chung, another young scientist who discovered the machines were failing and was silenced. Both of them went to the same person, John Carreyrou, an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal. He spent months interviewing former employees who all told the same story. The machine didn't work, the tests were inaccurate, and Elizabeth Holmes knew. In October 2015, John Carreyrou published his investigation in the Wall Street Journal. A prized startup's claim unravels. Theranos' response? They called it a lie. Holmes went on television and called Carreyrou a fraud. The Wall Street Journal article triggered a federal investigation. CMS inspected the Theranos laboratory. What they found was horrifying. The machine was a disaster. Machines malfunctioning, quality controls non-existent, potential for patient harm immediate and serious. In 2016, CMS banned Elizabeth Holmes from operating any medical laboratory for 2 years. Theranos was ordered to void 2 years' worth of test results, hundreds of thousands of patient results thrown out. The partnerships collapsed. Walgreens terminated its deal and sued Theranos for $140 million. Safeway wrote off its $350 million investment entirely. In June 2016, the SEC launched a formal fraud investigation. In 2018, Elizabeth Holmes was indicted on 9 counts of wire fraud. Theranos officially shut down in September 2018. $900 million raised, 0 returned to investors. The trial of Elizabeth Holmes began in 2021, one of the most watched trials in American history. Her defense? She genuinely believed in Theranos. She was a victim of her abusive boyfriend, Sunny Balwani, who controlled everything. The jury deliberated for 7 days. On January 3, 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She reported to prison in May 2023. Sunny Balwani was tried separately, found guilty on all 12 counts, sentenced to nearly 13 years, more than Holmes. The patients who received false results? Most never received any compensation. The investors recovered almost nothing. Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung spent years and hundreds of thousands in legal fees fighting Theranos lawsuits. They blew the whistle, they did the right thing, and they paid an enormous price for it. Elizabeth Holmes once said, "What we are doing is so important." And she was right, just not in the way she meant. What she did was show the world how dangerous it is when ambition replaces honesty, when the desire to be the next Steve Jobs becomes more important than the truth, when powerful people stop asking hard questions because they don't want the answers. The board never asked, the investors never demanded proof, the media celebrated before verifying. And the patients, the ones who had no power, they paid the price. A false HIV diagnosis, a missed cancer result, a miscarriage caused by wrong information. These are not numbers on a spreadsheet. These are human lives. Silicon Valley has a culture of fake it till you make it. Theranos showed us what happens when you fake it with people's health. Elizabeth Holmes built a $9 billion empire on a single lie. And somewhere along the way, she started believing the lie herself. Or maybe she never did. Maybe she always knew. And that is the most frightening possibility of all. $9 billion built on a lie. Thousands of patients given wrong diagnoses, and the woman responsible? She is serving 11 years in federal prison. The Edison machine never worked a single day. But the real question is, how did it go on so long? How did so many smart people miss it? Because Elizabeth Holmes didn't just lie. She understood exactly what people wanted to believe. Investors wanted the next Apple. Patients wanted affordable health care. The board wanted legacy. She gave them exactly what they dreamed of. She sold hope, and hope is the most powerful thing in the world to sell. The lesson of Theranos is not just about one fraudster. It is about all of us, about our willingness to believe what we want to believe, to trust what sounds too good to be true. Every generation has its Elizabeth Holmes. The face changes, the story stays the same. So the next time someone promises you a revolution, ask one simple question: can I see the proof? Because in a world full of people selling dreams, the most powerful thing you can do is demand reality. Theranos promised to change healthcare. Instead, it changed how we think about trust. It changed how regulators look at medical startups, how investors ask questions, how journalists investigate Silicon Valley. Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung are now celebrated as heroes. It took years, but the truth finally won. John Carreyrou's article became a book. The book became a documentary. The story became a warning for generations. Elizabeth Holmes sits in federal prison today, but Theranos' real legacy is the thousands of patients whose lives were put at risk. Some never got their correct diagnosis in time. Some made life decisions based on wrong results. Their stories will never make headlines. This is what happens when we worship founders more than we question them. When we let charisma replace credentials. When we let vision replace verification. Theranos is gone. Elizabeth Holmes is in prison. But the next Theranos is already out there somewhere, being funded, being celebrated, being believed. The only protection is the question nobody wants to ask. Show me the proof. Because hope is not a business plan, and charisma is not a blood test.